Hi, I'm April Long. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Pyxis. At Pyxis, we are building the trade settlement network for global South trade, starting from Africa-Asia corridor.
Welcome to the African Tech Roundup, April.
Thank you, Andile. Great to be here.
Let's start with the big numbers, the big macros of this problem. I read somewhere reputable that there's a 286 billion trade gap between the continent and China alone, to say nothing of the rest of Asia and Southeast Asia, where I know you're based. So how are you approaching that massive number in terms of solving for that gap?
Trade is evolving, especially if you look at how the global South would trade with each other and how the global North would trade each other is quite different because I'm in Kenya. We all know when I buy something in Kenya, when I import something in Kenya, I'm paying US dollar. But the dollar I'm paying is not for a factory in the US. It's most probably in a factory in China, India, Vietnam, China most probably. However, I'm paying the dollar. So that is a big gap where, I want to buy from China, a factory. How do I pay your currency? How do you accept me, the currency that I am paying? On the other side, the factory, same thing. He's selling something to a Kenyan business, but then he's receiving dollars. It's not a U.S. merchant buying. So I think that's a huge gap in between the global South. Countries want to trade with each other. However, they're not settling each other.
Right. And so maybe some context for our listeners who aren't familiar with you or your business, which is fairly new. Give us a sense of how you came to identify this problem and perhaps use this as an entree to introducing yourself and how you came to care about the trade gap between, Southeast Asia and the continent. What is your story?
I was born and raised in China. Got married to a Singaporean, so set up my Singapore house. And I have been in Africa, lived in Africa for 10 years, actually 12 years, 2 years in Tanzania, 10 years in Kenya. I started my career in Africa. I came when I was a student and later joined the banking sector, serving a lot of the Asian business, coming to do infrastructure, to do trading. And from there, when in 2020, 2021, when has been a lot of payment company homegrown in Africa, I then left banking and joined the payment startup side. So from there, I found, a lot of things for trade cannot be done from the bank. Banks won't change, SWIFT won't change, but the world is evolving, trade is evolving. So that's why I found, there's a huge opportunity there for payment company to be part of the settlement process to power trade. And you talked about the trade gap. Yes, I find now in Africa a lot of, the social commerce is coming up. There has been, a massive investment flowing into the e-commerce, social commerce part. However, I do feel like a big of the bottleneck is in settlement, because the settlement for social commerce wouldn't be coming from banks. Like, you can't imagine me doing an Instagram shop business in Nairobi, trying to buy things across the border with bank payment. It's hard to imagine. So that kind of payment company rail built on top of SWIFT or stablecoin or any sort of infrastructure has to be built to power the kind of fragmented small merchant kind of trade.
Help me get into the psyche of April 12 years ago, who would have come here fresh into her sort of branding and communication background and trying to explore what the link between China and Africa might be. Set the scene for me. How did that even make sense to you to begin with?
So I had my bachelor's degree in China and I was in Guangzhou that time. I enjoyed my 3 years for bachelor. I then somehow got into, my own university offered me an opportunity to go for a master degree just right after my bachelor's. So I went for it, but I didn't enjoy it. I was in the same environment for too long and it's not new for me. So I've been looking for opportunities to go somewhere. So I've been looking for exchange programs. I got to know this students organization called ISEC. ISEC is a students organization that is mostly in emerging market. I don't think it's quite popular in UK, US kind of development market. So it facilitates students exchange program, internship, volunteer programs. Yeah, so it's like, that can be a good opportunity for me to take a look at what is that outside of China. And I've always been curious. Initially, actually, like everybody else, I wanted to apply for programs in Europe, like the more developed regions in the world. However, then before I actually went for the exchange program for ISEC, I had an opportunity to go to Taiwan. I was in Guangzhou that time, so I had the opportunity to go to Taiwan for an exchange in my MBA program. There I met a professor. He has been sharing to us a lot about the social innovation and social business. I was never exposed to that before that. And then I got hooked up into this concept because I've always been a fan of the kind of making an impact. I was 20 years old. I was like very, hot-blooded. So
idealistic and enthusiastic.
Exactly. Before I went to Taiwan, I had already had a few internships. I actually interned full-time for a year in Ogilvy in China, in Guangzhou office, because I was in marketing, advertising. That was my major. And then from there, I was like, how do I balance? I want to make an impact. And I want to make money as well. In a way, at that time, I feel like, wow, making money and making an impact, it sounds like something that is contradicting each other.
I suppose you're coming up in Guangzhou, which I imagine 10, 12 years ago, which is roughly about the time I myself visited China. Guangzhou would have been the beating heart of China's aspirational tech future, right? At the time, right?
In a way, yeah. I mean, like about 10 years ago, I think more 13, 14 years ago, I think it was the time, when China has the whole digital transformation has taken place in China. So I was in the traditional Ogilvy, the full agency where we are doing the 360-degree integrated communication.
Ogilvy, this is like top 3 global ad firm.
It's a very fancy name because my major is in advertising. So Ogilvy is the idol for everybody in the sector, right? So I was very happy that I got into Ogilvy, and at the tail end of my internship, they actually offered me a full-time job. However, the pay was super low. And that was the tipping point for the traditional agencies to come down, and then the digital agencies are coming up. So, yeah.
So you joined just in time for that inflection point with Ogilvy obviously knew full well what their brand was worth and what it was worth for a young 20-something-year-old to get the chance to work there. Knew they didn't need to pay you much. But there's also a time, like you say, you start to recognize you don't need a massive, big brand name to do big, important and interesting work in advertising or branding necessarily. And so is that what you're talking about? Was that starting to happen in China as well, where, you didn't need to be at Ogilvy to be doing really interesting things in brand and comms?
That time, you still need a big brand. It's just, instead of the traditional all-in-one kind of agency where, we do TV, TVC and all the traditional media and the distribution. Actually, that hasn't been performing very well. The only part that has been performing well is the digital advertising,
which was starting to be disintermediated or I suppose starting to be fractured as part of their model.
Yes. So I was working for a big brand name, but by the way, I come from a very, ordinary family. Both of my parents are public school teachers, and I was born in a small town in China, small enough that most of the Chinese wouldn't know the name of the town.
So ending up in Guangzhou would itself have been an incredible achievement.
Most of my colleagues, they come and they take a $500 monthly salary and they still drive a BMW Mini. So basically, I am not able to afford the kind of lifestyle with that little pay. So it's like, wow. So what do? Do I go on this look like a fancy career, fancy job, but I was not paid much. So I was like, how do I live a lifestyle that I like, that I feel like I'm making an impact, that I feel like I've been contributing, and at the same time being able to afford a decent lifestyle. So which is very practical for me at 20 years old. And then I was introduced to this idea of social business. Before I knew that, I feel like business is just to make money. Social is purely for social good. You contribute. And then I was like, wow, that's such a good thing that you can make an impact at the same time of making money. And in that prospectus course, he gave us a lot of case studies from Harvard Business Review and all this. I think one of the article really, changed a lot of the perspective on how I look at emerging market. Because a lot of these social impact business case study are in emerging market like India, Africa, Southeast Asia. So it's called something at the bottom of the pyramid. So the author is debating. Normally, when you think of selling things in bottom of pyramid, you have to sell in huge volume and very thin margin. So the author is debating and saying, no, you need to know your client's demand. A lot of people who are in the bottom of pyramid, it's not condensed population. What I learned from it is I think people imagine about emerging market. The real thing is that you have to understand what's the reality, what do people really want. And I feel like, okay, isn't that what I have learned in my major as marketing? People think in Ogilvy, what you do is, make an advertisement. But actually, the strategic point is to have an insight on what's the demand, insight around human beings. So I feel like, okay, maybe that's something that I could try to get closer to this so-called either emerging market or bottom of pyramid, not to imagine these people. Maybe let me just go and see.
I've coined the phrase oversimplification is the enemy. And as someone who himself has spent time in brand and comms and advertising, fun fact, Ogilvy would have been one of my largest clients back when I used to make most of my income as a voiceover artist for Ogilvy clients. So to your point, so many oversimplifications about, what people want, what motivates their ambitions and their tastes, and what convinces them to make, different decisions, the impact of culture and consumer behavior. So many oversimplifications and projections made. I actually Googled the article as you were speaking. It's a Harvard Business Review article by Eric Semanis, Reality Check at the Bottom of the Pyramid. Is that the one you read?
Right.
2012 article published
exactly.
in June 2012. And I think you're absolutely right that, for a lot of people who do perhaps some of the most interesting, not just interesting, but impactful innovation, startup innovation, whether it's social business or it's cold, hard capitalist focused, there's a first principles notion about understanding who you're serving, understanding what motivates them, and then the humility to admit, as you did, that you couldn't figure that out from China.
Yeah, and basically I feel like, it's all coming out from a simple wish from a 20-year-old woman. Like, I want to make an impact as well as make some money at the same time. So I felt like, I couldn't get a good opportunity for that. So maybe I need to look outside of the box. And then I read a lot of, business case, and they happen to be all in, Latin, Africa, India. So now when I finished my Taiwan exchange experience, I went back to ISEC. I was like, I still want to go out. However, not European this time, Africa, Latin.
And so it was Tanzania initially?
Yeah, very quickly I matched to an opportunity in Tanzania in the tour agency. It's far from what I thought about NGO, bottom of pyramid, but at least I feel like it's a new opportunity. And coming from a comms background, I know mass media. I have an idea, at least on mass media. I know what they report is true, but it's not the full picture, I am sure. However, so-called backward or dangerous, that's the typical stereotypes about Africa. However true it is, I must be able to find the little corner that is safe to me, the little corner that is other people that I want to connect with. So
you couldn't find a safer country than Tanzania, let's be honest.
Well, I did enjoy, I enjoyed the experience so much in Tanzania. I still believe maybe in a mega downtrend, still there must be this very small thing that you could find, because I am just one human. What matters to me is not the macro. It's I finding my little micro society.
And so, you finished your exchange program with this organization. How long was the initial exchange, and what led up to you joining a large Chinese organization that was doing big business in Africa?
My exchange was like half year. Funny enough, I went to Africa thinking that I could be, closer to the NGO, closer to the business case that was written by Eric in the article. I didn't have the chance. So I think what was there for me is more of a Chinese society that is already doing business or doing something there. So that's naturally, where I can, plug into. So actually, just 2 weeks after I landed in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, I heard that there was a state visit from the new Chinese president, President Xi, visiting Tanzania. And it was President Xi's first state visit after he stepped up, becoming the president. That trip was 3 countries, Russia, South Africa, and Tanzania, if I was not wrong. And I was working in a tour agency. There's not many tour agency in Tanzania. So it then came to us like, you need to be part of this reception, logistic coordination. And I was like 23 years old. Receiving the president?
By the way, what are the odds you could have had a similar opportunity to receive the president while in China?
No, it's 0, 0, 0. Until when that was done, I had one picture where it's captured by a very famous media agency in China, where in a square photo, this is President Xi, President Kikwete, and the wives. And in the small little corner, there's like 1/3 of my face. I sent to my dad. My dad was...
couldn't believe it.
What happened? Yeah. So, it's, you asked me the odds. 0%.
So a little bit of an upgrade from Ogilvy, a little bit.
Ogilvy is considered more of the foreign, private ecosystem. And then the whole China government system is also quite remote.
It's huge.
So, and China is huge. Like, to see a president is very hard. It's rare. I wouldn't imagine of that. I've never dreamt of that.
I'm actually just Googling Guangzhou real quickly, population. So just for fun. Okay. So officially, I can tell you that Guangzhou's population, your former city, or the city you came up in professionally, it's 1.5 million odd people larger than my home country of Zimbabwe.
Just Guangzhou itself, right?
Just Guangzhou alone. Zimbabwe's population is just over 17 million and Guangzhou is nearing in on 19 million. So you meet the president, you're embedded in this tourism agency. At which point in your 6 months is this happening? In the middle, towards the end?
Actually, 2 weeks after I arrived.
That's crazy. Okay, so this is quite the entree. So at this point, you're probably thinking, I'm going to stay here longer than 6 months.
Not really. It was just mainly an experience for me. My role was like a tour guide. I'm a local tour agency employee. So I felt...
You know the thing.
Yeah, I pretend I know the thing. And I had a few of this, interaction. So not only in the president delegation, I later received some, ministerial level kind of delegation. That time, the bilateral, relationship between China and Tanzania was quite warm. And there was a lot of business delegations coming, government coming. I was also new, but I have to be the local guide. So I found, okay, I probably have this talent, especially for the Chinese community. I can be the local part for my Chinese counterpart.
The liaison.
Yeah.
The executive liaison.
And I am happy. Like, I stay with the driver a lot because I'm the tour guide. And he teach me Swahili songs and I teach him Chinese songs, so I'm very happily hanging out with driver or anybody. So when they see, okay, so you are very familiar with your driver and you can at least greet people and bargain in Swahili in local language, like they do believe you're the local guide.
Very nice. Very nice. Well played. So then let's fast forward a little bit because I'm getting a very vivid picture of what your entree to the continent was. I can see now, based on, the kind of shoulders you're rubbing, how you would then be enlisted by a state-owned entity that was doing business on the continent. And so I suppose that's what would have extended your tenure, your opportunity to actually make a livelihood while on the continent, continuing your learning journey. I hope I'm not oversimplifying the experience for you.
I mean, I actually met that company. They are one of the delegation I received when I was doing my internship. And then, of course, I was the local guide. And then when I get graduated, they have started a project in Tanzania and they need to hire talents. And the most thing that they lack is someone who can connect to the local community and have the foot on the ground. So they hired me. At that time, I actually got the offer from Ogilvy again after I graduated from my master program.
And they saw you in the picture with the president. They're like, we need that one back.
So I talked to them. They're like, actually, we do want you to come back and we'll give you a senior position. But I was like, going to Tanzania, going back to Guangzhou Ogilvy. And I have a few other options like, I want to go to Tanzania. I want to go to Africa.
So then it was China Power Investment Financial Company, which is the state-owned entity that enlisted you as a project manager. You stayed with them for like about a year or so. Tell me if I'm wrong. There's probably a link between your entree to banking in Nairobi and your entree to becoming a fintech entrepreneur. Yes or no? If you think about it, just in terms of your eyes opening to an opportunity, are there any parallels to your decision to leave China Power Investment Financial Company to join Standard Chartered Bank and then, later, join another bank before you became a fintech founder or not?
Actually, I never thought I would be in banking or financial service in any way. So the real thing was, I wasn't really used to work in a state-owned company.
Right.
And after staying like 1 year working in Tanzania, I still want to be in Africa. So that's the time I started to search for career options. But there's not much career options for me. So the only thing that I could find and would be a good option and would be the career path that I want to jump onto was Standard Chartered offered me a job. I couldn't find any other offer, which is in a more international environment.
By the way, not too shabby. You were mid-executive tier. It wasn't nothing. I think it also does speak to the warming relations, as you say, between China and East Africa at the time. I mean, 2015, I imagine banks in the region were starting to realize the importance of having someone who could bridge that relational gap, as it were.
Actually, I wouldn't describe myself as a mid-executive, though they gave me not a bad role.
It was a fancy title. I think it was like associate director or something crazy.
Yeah. But I mean, I was just a girl coming out fresh from school, knowing nothing. I think it was just they need someone at that time. So I was really lucky at that point being there. So I kind of got a so-called of that title. But if I didn't get this opportunity, I would go back to China. I didn't really have a good career option. I know that working in the Chinese state-owned is not something for me. It's not the culture I want. So then that's how I got into financial service, which I have not expected at all.
I mean, I'm not going to go through everything you did post then, but I mean, it does include working for another bank briefly, the Gulf African Bank, ending up in a startup, a Wapi Pay, and you eventually end up in the NGO space, working there part-time. But my question really is, what did you learn in the 4 years, call it 5 years of working in financial services on the continent that then opened your eyes to the eventual entrepreneurial opportunity you are now pursuing with Pyxis? Yeah, you'll tell me what that name means at some point.
I never chose to be in the financial service. It was like what needed in the market that time has chosen me to be part of it. After having a bit of experience in Africa, I realized, I mean, the kind of social problem that I am to serve is not immediately so-called putting people out of poverty. Who am I? So I felt the social impact problem statement for me should be bridging a cultural gap. And it's natural, it's easy for me. I can be like a cultural bridge for my Chinese community and an international community and a local community. I find myself comfortable in that space.
And I suppose you're also figuring out ways to monetize that as a proposition.
Right. Yeah, that's why the first time the China state-owned company hired me. It's actually very hard to get into the state-owned company. It's not even easier than Ogilvy. And that one is if you don't have a family member sort of being related, it's hard to get into. In China, we call it the system. It's very hard to get into the system.
So your family must have thought you were crazy to leave after just 1 year.
Especially for my parents' age, for them, like getting into a state-owned company, and especially in
That's
energy.
a lifetime appointment.
Exactly. That's, you can retire there. Like, why trying different things?
Mm-hmm.
And they were so happy for me. They're like, oh, they're so proud for me when I joined them. But anyway, I think it has always been that kind of, how do I make money? How do I make a social impact? That is powering me. And at the bank, I think at the end of the day, what I convinced myself is that I think there are a lot of Chinese trading companies, infrastructure companies who has been making impacts in Africa, who has been making products super, super affordable in Africa. However, I think because of the storytelling, they are not recognized. So in a way, in the bank, I am not in the NGO that are making a direct social impact, but by facilitating these trade companies who is able to bring super affordable product for the continent, I am also kind of helping and living in the, Eric's business case in the way.
Were you then aware at the time of China's status as Africa's largest trading partner? Was that apparent? Because you talk about the gap in the storytelling. Objectively, technically, China's been doing this, in terms of like doing the business in Africa now. I mean, without opening a whole can of worms about whether, good business practices always pervade those relations. Apart from that, I think objectively we can say it's been a very fruitful relationship that's benefited both parties, again, not accounting for who benefits more. But while you're in your 20s and joining the bank and all of this, are you aware of the sense of, hey, I'm right between Africa and its biggest business trading partner? Is that clocking, or does it just feel like you trying to do your career?
I am aware. I mean, growing from that ecosystem, I have definitely seen the kind of Chinese community growing in Africa, how their business has grown over time and scaled. However, it's not something that I feel like, oh, that's a trend. I need to be actively in it. So I think what is driving me is like still the same question. I wanted to come to Africa because I was super inspired by Eric's business case. How do I live in that? How do I be part of it?
And are you not watching companies like Transsion, for example, start to become, this ubiquitous force in the continent? Maybe the question should be, which businesses, apart from the state-owned enterprises that were doing like energy and mining and infrastructure, apart from those, what were you seeing as evidence of this growing momentum of trade between the two, Africa and China?
When I first joined the bank in 2015, I was talking to a few like big trading companies in the continent. And the conversation at that time I was having with them was, see, you've been doing great business. You should take some loans. Don't run everything on yourself. Take some leverage. And they are like, oh, we've been doing trade for 20 years and we organically grown into where we are. We've never taken loans. Why do I take loans? That's the day one, the conversation I had with them. 2 years later, these trading company becomes the biggest names in our sector, in the sector I was serving in the bank. And, before I left the bank, they transitioned from trading company to manufacturing companies. They started to set up plants and run local manufacturing. And now these companies are at IPO stage.
So, okay, now that to me helps explain why someone like you would go from a young person looking for organizations to hand her a career to someone who is now ready to basically start a business and be part of I suppose, making careers. I feel like seeing things like you've just described, given what I know about you and what sounds like a very driven individual, it can't leave you unchanged.
Yeah, I see opportunity there, of course. And despite opportunity, I also see a lot of gaps. And I feel like I am the right person to fill up the gaps. I've never been growing up imagining that I will start a business. Both of my parents are teachers in public schools. I mean, when I got hired by the Chinese state-owned company, they are like, oh, that's your lifetime job. I never had this image in my mind, I'll be an entrepreneur one day. All the way that I was here was because in the way I feel it's needed, I feel I can do that. So that's how I am here.
By the way, you're also giving such insight into for anyone who hasn't visited China or hasn't interacted with some of the entities you're talking about, some of our listeners who aren't familiar with that dynamic need to understand state-owned enterprise in China is the blue chip top tier of business, period.
Yeah, it's like if you're in Kenya, it's like the KPLC of Kenya.
It's like the Britam.
Exactly. Like BP oil company kind of thing where you never get fired.
Your parents probably mourned you leaving the state-owned enterprise to go join Standard Chartered Bank in a way that in people's minds who don't understand the context, Standard Chartered Bank doesn't hold a candle to these enterprises.
Ever since I told my dad I'm going to Africa, my dad is like, huh? What are you saying? Actually, my dad, I think he has been facing quite a lot of pressure, not so much on me. He's like, for the 10 years I've been in Africa, initially in China, no one really, think of Africa. And my dad was like, huh, why? When I socialize with other people and then your daughter is in Shenzhen, your daughter is in the US, your daughter is in the UK. Hey, my daughter doesn't seem to be much worse than them academically, like, she studied equally hard and she's performed very well. Why is my daughter in Africa? Which sounds very suspicious.
Oh my word, that's crazy. You see, what you're doing here is also doing what you're gifted at. This podcast is actually turning into quite the cultural exchange, the cultural window into realities that many of us on the continent, even someone like me who's actually been there for 3 weeks once in his life, and that's literally just to Shanghai and Beijing, you're conscientizing me to how worlds apart. And I keep using Africa collectively because, again, that big number, that big sort of trade gap is a collective number. And I know your experience is largely East Africa facing. But these are worlds apart in ways that I hope is coming across in this conversation.
I think one of the key words I really like is the word apart. I mean, I feel like I never thought I'll be an entrepreneur, but I feel like the kind of world apart is in a way telling me up. I feel like there's a Chinese April, there is more of a Western perspective of April, English-speaking April, and there is an April that is more of friends with more African, Kenyan. So I feel like these narratives are so vastly different, and I've been keeping so much of the so-called secret. These different parts of me are not coming together, and I have to do something for that. And that's really, I feel like this is what is driving me to really do something for it and get into a business for it.
Maybe then as a segue, what does Pyxis mean?
Pyxis is a southern constellation. Because we want to build a network and we want to connect the global south. And it's basically a southern constellation which connects.
So I actually just Googled it. The Pyxis constellation is more easily visible from the southern hemisphere, but can still be seen from the northern hemisphere at southerly latitudes, turns out. So you name your fintech this, and you're looking to sort of bridge that trade gap. You said settlement is a gap that you think is worth trying to address first. Why and how were you going about, trying to put a dent in that?
Well, actually, before coming to that, we pivoted a lot. So we started not from just from settlement point of view. We started from trade. Because for me, the tie with China is always trade. And the idea was also, how do we help people? How do we make an impact, right? So at that time, especially, when all the VC fund is just coming, we and myself as well, a lot of, tech startups assumed SMEs needs to be helped. And they will be helped by giving access directly to factories and given tools, for example, being able to pay directly. So very soon, within 2-3 months, I made an MVP, helping SMEs in Kenya to be able to pay their Chinese suppliers in CNY, in Chinese yuan.
They would be paying in
Kenya shilling.
And they'd receive in
yes,
one.
And instantly. And I was like, whoa, look at me. I built it in 2-3 months and it's going to be a game changer. Because
okay.
we are...
I sense a humbling on its way.
we are giving them direct access, whatever. And then we found there's no demand from the market. I tried, half a year just embedding myself into, the wholesale market in Nairobi. They're called Gikomba, Lutuli, River Road. I don't get demand. Basically, even if I get, they are super small ticket, but the onboarding, the kind of trust, kind of friction is so high. So my CAC doesn't justify my LTV at all. So, and also I have never been really the dearest little baby of VCs, being a female Chinese founder. So I don't have money to burn for that. But in a way, I also appreciate that I don't have the money to burn, or else I could have burned myself. So, and now I found it's not working. There's not enough demand, not what I imagined. It's not changing the market. But So
there's a gap. It's just not the gap you thought, and it's clearly not a gap that's going to make a business out of your idea.
That trial, I didn't get a big success. The product is still here. And we added to the product. However, we had to pivot. What I learned is sometimes we want to build the future already, but we forget we are in the present tense. And what is the present tense for trade in Africa? We're not yet at the time where SMEs or an individual can happily, easily doing that social commerce. It's still a very high friction, not transparent. And it's very hard. So where we are, from what I understand in Africa, bulk of the trade, majority of the trade, 90% of the trade are still dying in a more traditional way. And it connects to my former clients in Stanchart. So why did they grow like that over the past 10 years? They are the aggregators. And the traditional bulk trade is the most efficient way of trading because the economy of scale.
The future is not here yet.
The future is not here yet. And we need to build the future by serving who is there currently.
So you take this learning and you apply it to a pivot. What does that pivot look like?
There were a few steps of the pivot. So the first thing is, and I was quite stubborn. I was like, no, we have to work with SMEs. No, we have to work with SMEs.
I'm so grateful you didn't get VC money. Oh my word, you would have tanked. With that attitude, you would have burned through millions. Trying to prove your case.
Very stubborn, is so-called impact-driven, but not acknowledging the present, So I was like, okay, so if the demand is not in settlement, the demand is not in payment, then the demand is in buying. Because being a Chinese walking into a wholesale market in Uganda, in Kenya, in Tanzania, people are like, hey, Chinese, hey, come, China, what are you doing here? What are you selling? Everyone is saying hi to me. Come, what are you selling? So they all like, we want some product. What do you have? And can you find a supplier for me? So the next thing that I was like, okay, if they don't need to pay, they need to buy. Can I find them a factory that they can buy directly from? So I tried a lot in that. Last year, I even made a partnership with Alibaba doing, drop shipping. But the only thing we found out is that the economy of scale. Directly importing from factory in small volume, even if you have the direct access to a factory, it doesn't make sense. Going through an aggregator makes much more sense. Buying directly from a factory, but in small quantity, is going to make the price doubling, tripling. The difference is that high. So it only makes sense for if you're selling something that is really a niche. It's something that consumers are not price sensitive at all. In that process, I have to flip myself. You remember, my mentality was like, well, whatever the mass media is saying about Africa, I'm sure that I can find this small little environment that is micro, that is comfortable to me. But now I have to get out from that bubble because I kind of also always lived in a middle-class bubble in a way. So
You have to wade into that bottom of the pyramid you were reading about.
Exactly. Before, a lot of, Chinese businessmen when we're discussing, they're like, wow, Africa you have to sell the cheapest thing. It's extreme price sensitive market. I used to defend, I was like, no, it's that you don't get to this market, which, is more of a middle class. But now being hit by the reality on the ground, I was like, okay, I can't choose a side. I have to see it as a whole.
And this is where oversimplification is the enemy. Both of us are not the average everyday citizens of our continents or our countries. Speaking to the two of us, but I think anyone listening typically is in this class for the most part. It takes a lot of humility and intentionality to contend with the realities of how most people live and how different it is to the reality you've been served as a privileged, citizen of the world. And to take that and frame it into a business proposition takes another sort of entrepreneurial muscle, which it sounds like you're starting to hone now.
I mean, I made this with Alibaba and still we cannot. Then I was like, okay, that's the end of it. If I cannot, I cannot. And I have to go back to where, I have an edge. E-commerce isn't my edge, though I really want to make this trade work. But e-commerce is not something I understand. Let me come back to, the more of financial world, the settlement. I feel like, oh, okay, I have a bit of advantage. Let me go. I think in a way, the stubbornness in me is also, I don't want to compete. At the back of the mind, I wouldn't acknowledge it at that point. But when I look back, I want to maintain the sense of, in a way, filling in the bubble.
I totally relate because I always think in terms of my personal singular and specific attributes so that I don't have to be in competition with anybody. If you're now a fintech founder and you're solving for cross-border payments and settlements, that really does put you in direct competition with at least a couple of hundred other people.
Competition is a good thing. The thing is really, how do I position myself in the competition? Do I have an advantage? Do I have an edge? Actually, early this year is the time that I dropped everything on e-commerce. I constantly get requests, especially from my Chinese community. I need FX. I have FX demands. Can you do it for us? So we've been doing it for like a hassle to sustain the team because I didn't really get a lot of a little bit. I got a little bit, but not a lot. Not enough to keep us running. So I always had to hustle. So it was from those hustle, I was like, if you ask me and I have, why don't I provide? So I was like, that only takes only 10% of my time, but still sustain the team. I was like, okay, no, it's not the kind of SME in my mind that would work. It's these 10%. If it's making me profitable and giving me the fuel to burn on all these things that is not working, then I should focus on these 10% of the things. So then I was like, okay, maybe my edge is I build a bridge between the Chinese-based merchants who happen to be the 90% of the person who is making the trade in this corridor. And they're the bulk traders, that the traders who ship in containers. And those ones I try to work with are their local distributors.
One, you're following the money. Two, you're following the volume.
Right.
And you're almost ignoring or suppressing your intuition to go where the people are, because you were heading into the market because that's where you see the need. And it feels like that's where you should start. You know what? In a way, I'm listening to you, and it's partly why I'm a podcaster, because if you think about it, and I've shared this on the podcast before, there couldn't be a more exclusive media proposition. You'll appreciate this because you've done media, you've been a journalist, among other things. The most democratized medium in Africa is radio. If I were trying to be the most impactful broadcaster or media person or media owner in Africa, I would need to be in radio. And you could argue that the most impactful thing I've ever done as a media person was work for the BBC World Service, because, working on the Outlook program, which was heard by tens of millions of people around the world, that was the most impactful thing. Podcasting, however, is what actually gave me a career, internationalized my career. And if you think about it, it's the counterintuition of leaning into the exclusive proposition, because specifically when I started podcasting, it was arguably the most, even more exclusive a proposition than it is today, because the frictions of accessing or like subscribing and listening to a podcast, the frictions of it actually leveraging network effects on the internet, and of course the frictions of the cost of data to listen, whereas radio is free. And I'm so glad I was naive to those realities, at least early on, because I would never have started one. Two, I would not have discovered that impact can start as an exclusive proposition and filter down. And now, yes, we've got syndication through Business Report via like the writing. And yes, my column is read by 4 million people every week. But the kernel and the value and the flagship continues to be a fairly exclusive podcast that not everybody listens to.
Something that come to my mind when you were just talking about that was you tried to be in the future, an imaginary future, which you feel like it's a trend, it will happen.
Yes, I was living in a future where radio was disrupted by podcast and digital audio. Right? And that's what kept me motivated, because that's the story I told myself. That's why I'm so glad I didn't know that wasn't going to play out like that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it.
But actually, for you, I think it's working very well, which I'm really happy for you. For me, the imaginary future wasn't that close. I mean, the distance was still too far. But I feel like I still appreciate the stubbornness in me. And I feel like walking back, now coming to the present tense, it gives you clue on things you wouldn't be able to answer at your current timeline, time zone. You can guess a few things. Why is not happening? What would happen? I mean, it has been really hard for me the past 2 years. I feel like I have been working against a lot of things. It's really the kind of vision. And every day I have to remind myself my mission to keep myself going.
So how do you sum up your current portfolio of addressable opportunity as Pyxis right now? Where are you sitting today in terms of what Pyxis does, in terms of how you're keeping the lights on? So what's the business model, but also what is your iterative plan towards the future you envisage for the company?
If we are going in a singular way, the vision I had in the past 2, 3, or 10 years has not really changed. I firmly believe that SME will take over the space. Whatever is happening, a one man can run an e-commerce business, a social media, a social commerce business. I strongly believe it will happen. And I believe our team as Pyxis is going to contribute vastly into this process by connecting financial institution ecosystem in different emerging markets together. I feel like this vision has never been changed. What I have grown out is how to make it work, how it would happen, not forcing it, but by following what is already happening. And also
letting it emerge.
Right. And also, I think what actually grown, it's myself, is April. I think April has grown out of my own ego, my own fear, my own loneliness. So, with all this, overcoming all this internally, I create the environment and the possibility for me and also for the company to flow with what is already happening.
And how big is the team right now?
The team is 12.
12 people.
Yeah.
What are these 12 people doing today, knowing full well that in another year or two, the how might change and to serve the same vision? But I mean, what is it now? What do all these 12 people do every day?
Super proud of the team that we have formed. It's not easy to run a cross-cultural with oversight into, what is happening in Asia, especially China and Africa, and also understanding the global financial system. It's extremely hard to have all this in one team, and also the tech part. So now we have me and George. George is my husband. We founded this company together. And also we have got a new co-founder into the team. Also a banker, a Chinese banker coming from similar background, who has been in banking for 10 years, a Korean Chinese. So worked in Standard Chartered, Kenya, Citibank for East and South Africa, and now Stanbic Bank for West Africa. So now she's joining as head of CCO, like head of growth. Yeah, co-founder and CCO. And then I have a 4-person team in development part. It's a super powerful, small tech team. Wow, I'm always amazed by this team. I learned what is called agile development, agilability. Like, they never say no. And it's a very high level idea. Can we do it? They're like, let me think about it. 24 hours. We can do it. That's how we can do it. Before I got this team, I have, had another 3 tech team, which didn't work out. So it's a great team. And then I had.
Did you hire them as a group that had worked together before, or did you have to recruit them individually?
Very interesting. So it's referred by a partner for us in China, one of the biggest fintech as our partner. And he joined that Chinese fintech after he has quit his own startup as the co-founder. And that startup hasn't been doing well. So what I told him, I need a tag team. And he's like, oh, that was my ex-team. So they are now everywhere. They used to work in one team. But because the startup hasn't been doing well, so they all left. And then I picked them back.
So what's the team component in Africa?
So I have a partnership lead. He used to be an analyst in Ansler. And when I applied for Ansler, he was the person who was saying no for me. And then later this year, he joined the team. His reason for the no is a good reason. He's like, your CAC and LTV doesn't justify, which was true. So, and then he joined the team as the partnership lead. And then I have another 3 people in operation, 1 in marketing. Yeah, so that's overall, what we have.
Well, this has been quite an education for me. And so thank you so much for your time, April. I do wish you and the whole team at Pyxis well. I also must commend and appreciate your candor in sharing what you're learning from your live entrepreneurial journey. I think it's becoming more expected and normalized in our ecosystem now, but it's not as common as you'd think. And people typically come on to opportunities to have a conversation like this to project a sense of they've figured it out and, they know what they're doing. And it's been really refreshing to hear you reflect on success, on setbacks, and everything in between. It goes without saying that I really hope you keep that going so that we can all learn from your experience and perhaps have you back on the show after you figure more things out and have more to share.
Thank you, Andile. I hope next time when we chat, I would be telling you that I have found the way to make money and also the way to make an impact in good balance.
Thank you for being on the show, and stay alive and stay thriving.
Thank you, Andile. It's really great doing this show. And in a way, I know that I have this energy in me. I see that in you as well. I think this is what the kind of synergy you are bringing to the audience. So great work. And thank you so much.
And thank you. All right. Cheers.
Bye-bye.